The lukewarm Florida sun warmed my face as I navigated the valet line at the Ritz. "Just the usual, Ava?" the attendant asked, tipping his cap. A polite smile was my only reply. "Condo, right?" he continued, already halfway to retrieving my sensible sedan. A practical, reliable, totally unremarkable car. Perfect. Inside, the Gala was a sea of designer dresses and champagne flutes. My plus one, Elena, squeezed my hand. "Remember, smile, nod, and don't reveal the secret recipe," she whispered. Easy for her to say. She was just along for the free canapés. Across the crowded ballroom, I spotted him. Mr. Harrison, the CEO of Sterling Corp., the very corporation my consulting firm quietly advised. He gave a curt nod, dismissing me as a harmless acquaintance. Later, as I excused myself to the restroom, I overheard him bragging about a recent acquisition. He mentioned a hefty profit margin, an offshore account, and who handled all the logistics, some nameless consultant, Ava Sterling, efficient but hardly someone to worry about. He had no idea. The sting of his words was familiar, a low thrum of resentment I knew so well. It started in Lisbon in that stifling little hostel room. The note was blunt. "You're on your own, figure it out." 16, adrift, utterly alone. That's when the fire ignited, the need to prove them wrong, to show them everything. Elena found me huddled, sobbing on a park bench. Her kindness was a balm, a lifeline. "Come," she'd said, her voice thick with a Portuguese accent, "you can work in the bakery. You will eat and you will have a roof." She saw something in me, a spark that even I hadn't recognized. The discarded laptop, Elena's gift, became my classroom. Hours poured into learning. Finance, logistics, international law, I devoured information, each keystroke a defiant act. The first stock trade, a small purchase of a tech company, felt like a victory. It was my first secret success. I watched the numbers climb, a tiny thrill coursing through me. No one knew, no one cared. The early days were brutal. Ramen noodles for dinner, sleepless nights spent deciphering complex trade agreements. But the money started to come. Small at first, then bigger. I registered a firm, a shell company, using Elena's address. Sterling Global Solutions was born. I chose the name deliberately, close to Ava Sterling but distant. A subtle yet effective disguise. My first major break came when a local shipping company, struggling to compete, hired me. I streamlined their operations, slashed costs, and doubled their profits in 6 months. The owner, a gruff man named Ricardo, was ecstatic. He offered a hefty bonus, praising my resourcefulness. He had no idea the quiet, unassuming woman in the corner office was orchestrating a financial revolution. The secrecy became a necessity. The shame, the fear of exposure. The thought of my parents finding out, of them trying to leech off my success, was paralyzing. I built walls. Offshore accounts, anonymous investments, and a deliberate lack of visible extravagance. The facade was easy to maintain. The real burden was the loneliness. I remember the day I bought my first property, a small apartment building in Lisbon. The feeling was surreal, a sense of control I'd never known. But I couldn't share it with anyone, not even Elena. The secret became a cage. Then came the email. A real estate listing with a familiar address. The house I grew up in, my childhood home, the home my parents now flaunted online as their retirement paradise. The fury, it was a white-hot inferno consuming everything. The carefully built facade, the years of self-control, began to crack. It was time to take back what they had stolen, not just my home, but my sense of self. The gloves were off. Now, the real game begins. My portfolio, meticulously diversified, showed over $350 million in liquid assets, spread across a network of holding companies in the British Virgin Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore. Sterling Global Solutions, the nameless consultant, managed over $1.2 billion in client funds annually, generating an average profit margin of 18%. The real estate holdings, a mix of commercial properties and luxury residential units, were valued at over $100 million, providing a steady stream of passive income. My discreet involvement in shipping logistics controlled 15% of the import-export traffic through key ports in the southeastern U.S., a detail carefully omitted from the public record. The online education platform, a pet project, was generating over $30 million in annual revenue, focusing on providing affordable, high-quality business courses to students in underserved communities. The scholarships I anonymously funded, totaling over $5 million a year, were just a tiny fraction of my charitable giving, all managed by a discreet foundation in Liechtenstein. My modest condo was merely a convenient base of operations. In reality, I owned a penthouse in Monaco, a vineyard in Tuscany, and a private jet that remained largely unused, except for the occasional business trip. The irony of my daily interactions was a constant companion. I'd offer Mr. Harrison, my client, a suggestion for a new acquisition, a deal I was already intimately familiar with through my own holding companies, all while he patronizingly patted my arm, calling me a good egg. That good egg was the primary beneficiary of his firm's success, but he'd never know it. The satisfaction was a cold, hard thing, a silent acknowledgement of my true power. I'd sit in board meetings, listening to strategies I'd helped formulate, masking my knowledge with a polite smile, offering suggestions, all the while knowing I controlled the levers of the entire operation. At social events, I'd feign interest in the latest trends, while my investment portfolio was single-handedly propping up several of the most successful companies on the planet. The strategic anonymity had always been a cornerstone of my operations. I'd deliberately chosen unremarkable cars, avoided flashy clothes, and cultivated a persona of quiet competence, not outward wealth. My public image was a shield, a deliberate misdirection. When Ricardo, the shipping magnate, offered me a partnership, I declined, citing conflicts of interest. He, of course, had no idea that I was the one who controlled his primary competitor. The day I received the notification of the foreclosure, I felt a surge of something akin to righteous anger. The auction, a strategic masterstroke, was set for the following week. Elena was already finalizing travel arrangements. The plan was simple: secure the property, reveal myself, and watch their world crumble. I carefully studied the auction listings, paying particular attention to my childhood home. The image, a glossy photograph of my parents' beaming faces in front of their dream home, stirred the familiar ache. They had no idea. I met with my legal team, meticulously reviewing every detail, ensuring the operation was flawless, legally sound. I reviewed the purchase agreement, the eviction notices, and the press releases, crafting a narrative that would protect my anonymity until the opportune moment. I had the resources to fight off any legal challenges, any attempts to expose my true identity. The tension was building, a tight coil in my stomach. As the date of the auction approached, I felt both exhilaration and dread. Would they recognize me? Would they try to reason with me? Or would they just crumble? I knew the answers, but the anticipation was almost unbearable. I would arrive in Florida, a ghost from their past, now fully in control. The carefully constructed walls were about to come crashing down. The email arrived on a Tuesday, a routine update from my real estate broker. Attached was a photograph, a snapshot of the auction participants, a blurry crowd of hopeful bidders. But in the foreground, clear as day, were my parents. My mother, her face a mask of nervous calculation, my father, his gaze fixed on the auctioneer, a flicker of desperation in his eyes. They were there. The implications were immediate. They knew. Somehow they knew. I stared at the image, the blood draining from my face. How? Had they discovered my identity? Had they somehow tracked my movements? The carefully constructed web of secrecy felt suddenly fragile, the foundation of my empire threatened. The planned confrontation, the carefully orchestrated reveal, was no longer a strategic game but a desperate gamble. I slammed the laptop shut, the metallic click echoing in the silent condo. Elena, ever perceptive, entered the room, her brow furrowed with concern. "What is it, Ava? You look pale." I forced a smile, a flimsy attempt at composure. "Nothing, Elena, just a change of plans." The auction was scheduled for Friday morning. I booked a private jet, bypassing commercial flights, minimizing any potential exposure. The preparations became feverish. I contacted my lawyer, reinforcing security protocols. I had him run a complete digital scrub, erasing any trace of my online presence that could be exploited. I contacted Ricardo, feigning a sudden illness, and temporarily suspended all upcoming project meetings. The flight was a blur of strategic planning and internal conflict. The revelation, the moment of reckoning, had been my driving force for years. Now, with my parents' awareness, the carefully crafted narrative was being rewritten on the fly. My meticulously plotted confrontation had to be executed perfectly, a dangerous high-stakes game of chess that I needed to win. The jet landed in Naples, Florida. The Florida heat hit me like a physical blow. The drive to the auction was a tense silence, Elena giving me a steadying hand. As we approached the courthouse, the scene was a whirlwind of activity. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled. My parents were already there, their faces pale, their eyes darting around as if searching for me. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the crowded room. The bidding started, a flurry of numbers. I watched as my parents tentatively bid, their faces a mixture of hope and fear. Their desperation was palpable. The final bid came down to me. I raised my hand, bidding the amount that would leave them destitute. The auctioneer banged his gavel. Sold, my parents' faces crumpled. Their secret, their financial salvation, had slipped away. The plan was to meet them, to reveal my identity on my terms, but their presence at the auction had changed the equation. The carefully orchestrated reveal had morphed into a desperate showdown. We followed them, Elena and I, as they stumbled out of the courthouse, their shoulders slumped in defeat. They didn't see us. They were too consumed by their own loss. We found them in a nearby coffee shop, nursing lukewarm coffees. I stood at the entrance, watching them. My mother was sobbing, my father was silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. The moment had arrived, but it was not how I had imagined it. The game was on. I took a deep breath. This was it. I walked into the sterile, beige-walled real estate office, the air thick with the scent of fresh coffee and desperation. My parents were already seated, slumped in uncomfortable chairs, their faces etched with a weariness that went beyond the auction. My mother's carefully coiffed hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. My father, a man who'd always valued appearances, looked as if he'd aged 10 years. I approached the receptionist, a young woman who barely glanced up and announced, "I'm here to see the homeowners regarding the property at 14 Oak Street." The receptionist, completely oblivious to the high drama unfolding, pointed towards a door. I walked through it, Elena a silent sentinel behind me. They looked up, startled. My mother gasped, a strangled sound. My father's jaw tightened, his eyes widening in a mixture of shock and, was it fear? I closed the door, the click echoing in the sudden silence. The room felt small, suffocating. I stood before them, my tailored pantsuit crisp, my expression neutral. The oversized sunglasses I had worn to the auction were now pushed up onto my head. I reached up, slowly, deliberately, and removed them completely. Their reaction was immediate. My mother's face crumpled. "Ava," she whispered, her voice trembling. My father, however, remained silent, his face a mask of controlled rage. "Hello, mother, father." My voice was calm, steady, devoid of any emotion they could use against me. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years. My mother lunged forward, reaching for me, her hands outstretched. "Ava, darling, please, we didn't know, we didn't understand." Her voice was laced with a frantic desperation, a desperate plea for forgiveness. I stepped back, my face impassive. "Save it." My father finally spoke, his voice tight, controlled. What do you want?" I met his gaze, my eyes cold. "I want what you took from me, control." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "These are the eviction notices. They are effective immediately." My mother began to wail, a high-pitched, keening sound. "You can't do this. We're your parents. You're being cruel." She grabbed at my arm, her nails digging into my skin. I pulled away, my face hardening. "You abandoned me. You left me to fend for myself. You left me to rot. Remember." The words were a sharp jab, a painful reminder of their callous betrayal. Elena stepped forward, her hand resting protectively on my arm. She took the eviction notices from me and handed them to my parents, her expression a mask of icy disapproval. "You have 30 days, she said, her voice a sharp contrast to my mother's hysteria. My father finally broke, his composure shattering. He slammed his fist on the table, his face contorted with rage. This is a disgrace. You're a monster." I felt a flicker of something not triumph, not joy, but a cold, hard satisfaction. "Perhaps, but a monster you created." I turned to leave, my back straight, my head held high. As I reached the door, I paused. "Oh, and father, the consulting firm your company uses? Sterling Global Solutions? That's mine, too." I heard his strangled gasp as I closed the door, leaving them in the wreckage of their shattered world. The immediate aftermath was a blur. The phone calls, the frantic emails, the online accusations that followed were all easily dismissed. The power dynamic had shifted, irrevocably. I was no longer the abandoned teenager. I was the one with the power, the one with the keys. The game was over, and I had won. The next day, the media circus began. My parents, desperate to salvage their reputation, unleashed a torrent of accusations online. Greedy daughter, vindictive child, stolen inheritance. Their friends, their acquaintances, even distant relatives, weighed in with their own opinions, their words a mix of sympathy and condemnation. I ignored it all. My focus was elsewhere. I instructed my PR team to issue a single statement. Ms. Sterling does not comment on personal matters. The silence was deafening, a powerful weapon against the onslaught of negativity. The accusations, the online tirades, were nothing more than background noise. I had a new mission now. I contacted a contractor, a woman with a reputation for revitalizing neglected properties. Within weeks, the foreclosed house on Oak Street was transformed. Gone were the manicured lawns and ostentatious decorations. In their place were vibrant flower beds, a small vegetable garden, and a playground. The interior underwent a complete renovation, the sterile rooms replaced with warm, inviting spaces. Elena, as always, was indispensable. She oversaw the kitchen, designing a space that would become the heart of the home. I held a small press conference, inviting local media outlets to tour the newly renovated home. I announced my plans. It would become a safe haven for at-risk girls, a place where they could receive support, education, and a second chance. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, volunteers offered their time, and local businesses pledged their support. My parents' online campaign fizzled out. Their accusations rang hollow, their attempts at manipulation ineffective. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer the villain. I was the benefactor, the savior, the one who was building something beautiful from the ashes of the past. I stood in the backyard of the transformed house, the setting sun casting long shadows across the freshly mown lawn. Laughter echoed from inside, the happy chatter of the girls as they prepared for dinner. Elena emerged from the back door, her face radiant. She handed me a cup of tea. "They are already calling this place home," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me. I watched as the girls played, their faces lit with joy. I saw myself in them, in their struggles, their resilience, their need for acceptance. I realized that the pain of abandonment would never completely disappear, but now it was tempered by a profound satisfaction. The carefully constructed walls of anonymity began to crumble. I allowed myself to be seen, not as a victim, but as a survivor. I started attending community events, speaking at local schools, and using my resources to support other causes. I was no longer just Ava Sterling, the faceless consultant. I was Ava Sterling, the woman who had built a new life, a new legacy. The repercussions were subtle but powerful. Mr. Harrison, now fully aware of my influence, adopted a more deferential tone, his curt nods replaced with genuine smiles. Ricardo, the shipping magnate, offered a more lucrative partnership, a gesture I gently declined. The world, it seemed, had begun to see me differently. The transformation extended beyond my personal life. The education platform expanded, offering scholarships to hundreds of deserving students. The shipping logistics company, under my strategic direction, streamlined its operations, generating record profits. The scholarship program I'd created went public. My anonymous giving became a beacon of hope. Standing in the backyard, surrounded by the laughter of the girls I now protected, I realized that success wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about creating something that would endure, a legacy of compassion and resilience. My worth wasn't defined by those who left me behind, but by what I chose to build next, the next chapter. I smiled, the setting sun casting a golden glow on my face. The pain had not vanished, but it had been replaced by a profound satisfaction. It was a beginning. The first real change I noticed was in Elena's demeanor. Her pride in me, always present, now radiated a warmth I hadn't fully appreciated before. The baking classes she started at the house were wildly popular, and the girls thrived under her guidance. not just learning recipes, but also the value of resilience and self-reliance. She was the heart of the home, and I, for the first time, felt truly connected to something larger than myself. My work life shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Mr. Harrison, once dismissive, now sought my advice on every major decision. His deference, while initially satisfying, was ultimately shallow. He still saw me as a resource, not an equal, and the knowledge of his true dependence on me was a constant, quiet amusement. Ricardo, on the other hand, offered a true partnership, a gesture that felt far more genuine. We discussed it over a long lunch, overlooking the ocean, and I realized that I, for the first time, might be open to trusting someone, to allowing someone to share in my success. The attention, however, wasn't always welcome. My parents' attempts to discredit me online backfired, but the story of my rags-to-riches journey caught the attention of the media. Initially, I declined all interviews, preferring to maintain my privacy. But then, I realized that I could use the platform to amplify my message, to advocate for the girls, and to inspire others. The decision to speak publicly was difficult, forcing me to confront the vulnerabilities I'd so carefully guarded. The first interview was a disaster. I stumbled over my words, feeling exposed and vulnerable. But with each subsequent interview, I grew more comfortable, more confident. I learned to control the narrative, to focus on the positive impact of my work, and to use my story to inspire others. I became a spokesperson for second chances, a champion for at-risk youth. The most unexpected consequence was the shift in my relationship with my siblings. I hadn't spoken to them since I was a child, and I had, in my own way, blocked out their existence. The news of the revelation reached them, filtered through the family grapevine, and I received a tentative email from my younger sister. She was curious, she wrote, and wanted to understand. This opened a door to reconciliation, a path I hadn't anticipated, and one that filled me with a mix of hope and trepidation. We met for coffee, a stilted, awkward reunion. They were shocked by my wealth, but more surprised by the fact that I had created something meaningful. They expressed regret for their past actions, for their failure to speak up when our parents had banished me. We began a slow process of rebuilding, tentatively forming a bond that was, at times, strained but also deeply felt. The girls at the house, however, were the constant reminder of my purpose. Their laughter, their resilience, their unwavering belief in a brighter future were the fuel that drove me forward. I saw myself in their eyes, in their struggles, in their need for belonging. Their growth, their achievements, were a reflection of my own. The next step was the creation of the Sterling Foundation, a public entity dedicated to supporting at-risk youth. I wanted to ensure that the work I was doing would continue long after I was gone. It was a commitment to a legacy, a testament to the fact that the scars of abandonment could be healed, that the ashes of the past could give birth to something beautiful. I stood on the porch of the house, Elena beside me, watching the girls play in the garden. The Florida sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the lawn. The air was filled with the scent of freshly baked bread and the sound of children's laughter. We were finally ready for the grand opening of the foundation. I felt a peace I hadn't known before, a sense of belonging that transcended wealth or power. It was a beginning, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that the best was yet to come. The salt-laced breeze carried the scent of jasmine and the faint echo of laughter from inside the house, now filled with the vibrant energy of the girls. Standing here, on the porch of the home reborn, I felt the weight of the past, not as a burden, but as the very foundation upon which I'd built a life. I had gained a fortune, a voice, and a purpose. I had lost innocence, trust, and the illusion of a perfect family. The secrecy, once a shield, had become a cage, but in breaking free, I'd found a freedom far more profound. The whispers of Mr. Harrison, the pitying glances, the hollow praise, they meant nothing. The true reward lay in the faces of the girls, in the quiet strength of Elena, in the knowledge that I was no longer defined by those who abandoned me. I am defined by the roots I have nurtured. Look closely, reader, at those moments you were overlooked, underestimated, or simply unseen. For within those shadows, a hidden empire may be waiting to be built.